This is the TSA study hall session, and I want to talk a little bit about our very special guest. And thank you so much, Allison, for joining us tonight. Allison Intrieri is an accomplished television writer and producer whose credits span some of network TV's most iconic dramas. She has written and produced for Law and Order, SVU, Chicago Justice, Bull, East New York, as well as Power, Force, and Rogue. Allison began her television career as a Writers Guild of America fellow on Star Trek Enterprise, woohoo, one of my favorite treks, actually, and soon joined Law and Order SVU, where she spent 4 seasons, starting in the Writers Research Department before writing her first freelance episode. That script, based on a Without a Trace spec, led to her being staffed on the series when it went into production under the title Clock. After a year on staff, she moved on to other shows, but returned to SVU in 2017 as a producer and writer for 2 more seasons. Though best known for her work in procedural drama, Allison originally set out to write comedy. Her desire to work in television began in 1998 when she was cast as an extra on the hit sitcom Friends, a moment that cemented her passion for storytelling. She believes that even in the darkest dramas, there's always room for a touch of humor. She's currently developing a legal drama with Law and Order veteran Michael Chernuchin with Elizabeth Rome's production company attached. Allison lives in Los Angeles with her dog and her son. She's about to publish her first children's book, which sounds exciting.
A learning experience.
Snoop Dogg.
You realize we're cops, right?
Yeah, but I ain't done nothing.
Guest stars in a ripped from the headlines SVU.
It's real rough being rich.
An attack on a pop diva starts a war.
Oh, you coming to take me out?
SVU, next Thursday on NBC.
And I know there's a story behind that, which may or not be suitable for TV. Who knows?
We're being recorded, so.
You want to talk real quick about your, how you got to Los Angeles and started working in television as a writer?
Sure. So you went over a little bit of it in my bio. I'm from Pittsburgh originally, and I loved the entertainment business, television, film, like everybody that comes out to Los Angeles and wants to pursue this career. So there's nothing really unique or special about me in that way. But, it's interesting. Like, I didn't just love watching movies and watching TV. I was also really into like all of it, like the magazines and everything and the celebrity and all of that. So I went to college at Loyola in Chicago, and because I always wanted to go to LA, that was like my dream. But at the same time, it seemed to somebody who grew up in Pittsburgh and didn't even have a driver's license at the time, that felt like it was like something that was never going to happen, that was very far away. So I went to school and I got my degree with a focus in English and creative writing. And I had a choice to either go and get my MFA or go to LA. And I think I was just kind of ready to be done with going to school and being at like a different kind of broke, because you're not exactly like coming out here and suddenly just, like falling over in wealth. But so I got my license, I got a car, and I drove across country to LA. And when I got here, it was 1998. Television was very different. It wasn't looked at the way that features were looked at, like features and movies and screenplays and all of that. Like, that's where people really kind of took you seriously, not just in Los Angeles, but in, the country. Like, I remember a guy that I went to college with saying, like, do you feel like you're dumbing yourself down because you're going to write for TV? But the thing was, TV wasn't streaming yet. It was really just network. And I was in a writers group with a guy who sold his feature, and all I ever heard from him was Angelina Jolie's company was looking at him, Michael Mann's company's looking at it, but nobody ever made it. So he got the big, feature paycheck for writing it and selling it, but he never, that movie never got made. And I just thought I want to see my stuff on screen like right away. Like I don't want to wait for maybes and I don't want to share maybes. So that was sort of like my thinking that like TV was easier to get into. And I also love television. But I didn't really know TV writing was a job so much because when I got out here, I went on a bunch of television shows. I was on everything as an extra. I looked very young. I was on Buffy the Vampire Slayer all the time. I was on 90210. I was on all of it. And it was very cool because like I was hanging out with like not friends with them, but like just sitting around and like Sarah Michelle Gellar, I could like, tap her on the shoulder if I wanted to. But but I was on the set of Friends and I read the script because they give it to you to mark. And I'm reading it. And the thing that made me want to be a TV writer was I thought it was funnier on the page than on screen. It was here compared to like how funny the show is. And if you think about how popular that show is and how funny it was, can you imagine it being funnier on the page? It was so funny. It was so smart. It was so intelligent. And a lot of that gets lost because you're paying attention to Jennifer Aniston's outfit and you're paying attention to whether they're going to make out or not, and get back together and whatever it was. So they had the script for the next week also sitting on a table. And I was like, no one's paying attention to me. So I poured through it and that was it. I was like, I want to be a TV writer. I went home, I wrote like 3 Friends specs. I wrote an Everyone Loves Raymond. I was very much wanting to do comedy. But, the hard thing about Los Angeles is if you don't know anybody when you get out here, it's really hard. It is really hard to break in. Sometimes you get lucky, but it's a challenge. And I just didn't know anybody. And so even with as much as I sent my resume and did whatever I thought I could do to get a job, like I wasn't getting one. So I got an in at Star Trek Enterprise, which was completely the polar opposite. And Mark's a huge fan of Star Trek. I mean, went to the movies as a kid, but that was really it. I wasn't like a huge Star Trek person, which also was incredibly intimidating that to get hired on a show like that and be like, I don't know anything about Klingons. But it was a Writers Guild fellowship and I had to submit a script. And I remember I came in with my Everyone Loves Raymond script and it just was, very funny. And, I think they thought I was like a cute little girl and they were like, okay, we'll give her a shot. And I got in that way. And then the surprising thing about it was by the time I finished my fellowship there, I said to myself, I would be so lucky if I got to be on this show. I'd be so lucky if I got to write for this show. Because once you're there and you're in the writer's room and you're breaking the story with the writers, like you're in the action and you're really like I couldn't even like absorb all that I was learning from that experience. It was amazing. And the fellowship, you were with the writers the whole time. You shadowed the showrunner and you shadowed the writers. So you were in the story room the entire time. I was part of the tone meetings, which is, if you guys don't know, like you sit in and you listen with the showrunner as they go through the whole episode, telling the director, like, this is what this scene is supposed to be. This is what this scene's supposed to be. And like, so on and so forth. And it was, it was just such a cool like thing for, my 26-year-old self to just be sitting there and being allowed to be a fly on the wall. And then from there I was out of work for like as not out of work, but I didn't the fellowship ended and the way that it worked back then is there was really only one staffing season. So once everybody had their jobs, that was it. And you don't really get to work again until the next staffing season, even if like you're the writer's assistant or the PA or whatever it was. So I went and got a job working at a talent agency because I felt like this would be a great thing to beef up my resume so that I can get a job as a writer's assistant because I had this experiencing working for agents, answering phones, rolling calls, like all the buzzwords that you have to use when you're trying to get in on the ground up. So I did that. And the entire time I just kept I looked under any rock that you could possibly find to see if I had like a connection somewhere to get the next job. And I think in that time, I got an interview to be the showrunner's assistant on Dawson's Creek, which I didn't end up getting. Um, but I did land SVU, and I did the research for the writers for like a couple of years. I was a writer's assistant and did the research, and then I wrote a Without a Trace spec that was very much in the vein of what the showrunner was attracted to, because I spent a lot of time giving him articles and recognizing what his taste was and his style was. So I picked a topic that was very much in the world of interest to him, thinking that he would read it and say, okay, we'll give her a freelance or an opportunity to pitch. And he was he felt like, oh, this should be, we can make this an SVU. We haven't done this yet. We haven't done this storyline yet. I don't know if you guys know the name Neil Baer. He was on ER for years. He was the showrunner. I worked with him for 4 years. He's incredibly talented. He's incredibly smart. And he was a doctor, or he is a doctor as well. So he's very interested in anything medically. And I had decided to do a story on Turner syndrome, which wasn't something anybody knew a lot about. And it was like, you kind of, the episode centered around a girl who had Turner syndrome, and there, because she didn't go through puberty, she, due to genetic disorder, she looked like a little girl, even though she was like, 16 or 17 years old. So when she disappears, the idea was, is she kidnapped, or did she run away? Because we're dealing with a teenager, but she doesn't look like a teenager. But anyway, and the only reason I tell you that story is just because I really picked something that I knew he would respond to. I didn't expect him to respond to it in that way. The kind of story was, you never sell your spec to a TV show. Like and you don't, and they also, at that time, because you don't write specs anymore, at that time, they didn't even want you to write a spec for the show that you were trying to get a job on, because people were so, which is why I didn't write a Law and Order SVU spec. I was like, they'll be too judgmental of this. And especially if they don't watch Without a Trace, they'll be, less harsh on it, and see what was great about the characters and the storytelling. So anyway, so that's how I started. And there's like little things here and there that I left out that maybe they'll come out in the with this or with the Q&A, but that's kind of the path.
I think you sent me a clip. Should we roll that?
Sure. It was just really to show the video of the mask, and then the photo that follows with the mask.
Let's see that.
Yeah. So this is kind of an example of, and there was just a question in the chat about how the writers' rooms work. So this kind of works into the story. So I was on SVU twice. The second time I was on it was 2017 to 2019, which was when this episode that you just saw a little clip of aired. And I had flown in. They gave me about 2-day notice for the job, and I was living in LA, and it was, if I wanted it, I had moved to New York. And I had already known that I was probably going to get an offer on this, but until the offer comes in, like, you can't go and buy a plane ticket and get an apartment in New York. I mean, you're setting yourself up for potentially spending a lot of money and not having a job to pay for it. So I got the job on Wednesday. I packed everything up, closed my deal on Friday. Then I went and got a plane ticket and subletted I did an Airbnb, and I flew into New York on Monday because my boss wanted me there on Monday. So I came in on a red eye, and I wanted to show that I was eager and ready to work. So I showed up in the afternoon, but I was like, I'm just going to show up and put in some FaceTime. Like, they're not going to expect anything from me today. And so when I got in there, they were like, so we finished breaking this story, so we'll start with your episode after lunch. And I had some ideas, but I still was like, what? And my boss, who was also coming in with there being another executive producer that was working there and had been there for years, was also, we were all, we were all kind of on our best behavior. So she had presented a story that she thought was interesting, and he was kind of like, why don't you do this story? I sort of had the attitude in my head, I felt very much like, I don't want to do this story. I want to do one of the stories that I was planning on pitching to you. But at the same time, I also understood the dynamic and playing nice and everything like that. So I said yes, and we worked through the story. And then we said, okay, we're all going to go home and come back tomorrow. And I spent the entire way home to my hotel thinking, how am I going to get out of this story by tomorrow? Like, I don't want to do the story. I want to do a different story. Well, it didn't work. So I ended up doing the story. But the thing that is important to know whenever you're working in a writer's room is it's different for each show. Not every show's writer's room works the same. Some writers' rooms that are procedural shows, like SVU, once like the season gets up and running, you don't really have a writer's room. You're really kind of going to the showrunner, pitching your idea. If you're writing it with another writer, you're pitching it together, and then you go off, you break the story together, you write the outline, you hand it in, you get notes, and then you do the script. And that kind of is how it happens. Other shows like Power Force are serialized. So you're in a room all day from like, depending on how hard your boss wants to work. Some people, especially being on Zoom a lot now, want to work like 10 to 4. Other people want to work like 9:30 to 6:30. So whatever it is, you go in, you sit there, either you pitch a story or something's pitched to you, and then everybody breaks it together. And then you go off and you write the outline by yourself, unless you're coupled with somebody, and then you get notes from the showrunner. And at that point, unless it really doesn't work, and it's not always your fault that it doesn't work, a lot of times it's not your fault that it doesn't work. But if it doesn't work, then everybody's brought back in to re-break it. Not maybe the whole thing from page one, but maybe, like the back half. But otherwise, like, he just gives you notes, and you just go off and do the notes and do the script on your own. And you get notes from the showrunner, and maybe there's one other executive level writer that would give notes or might be assigned to you, if depending on how much work the showrunner has. Like, higher level writers can tend to supervise lower level writers a lot to just kind of keep the train moving. But I went home and I looked at the outline, and for me, there wasn't really that much of a story. It was about, I don't know if you guys saw the unforgettable story of rape, where the girl, they thought she was lying, and she was telling the truth, but then she kind of, because she was in foster care, she sort of pulled back on what she said, and then they charged her. It was like a whole mess. So this was actually based off of that real life story, but this episode was broken and written and came out well before Unbelievable Story of Rape. But the thing that was interesting about this story was, this guy, after he rapes these women, he makes them take a shower, and he strips their bed and pours bleach on it and whatever, and then goes out the window that was broken, but he fixes the window before he leaves. Like, this was the real life story. The guy, like, he was like called like the gentle rapist or something like that. So I just was like, what else is there though? There's nothing else there. And this is sort of something that I think is one of the biggest lessons I learned in writing for television. You do not want to go and take your beat sheet and make an outline of your beat sheet. If it doesn't work as you're writing it, you need to fix it. You need to come up with things to make it better. You don't need to always go to your boss and say, hey, this isn't working. What if I did this or that or whatever? Because they're so busy, they don't have time to like really sit with you and talk. And they'll hear a lot of times like, no, we broke this. I signed off on it. It works, when it doesn't, because they don't have really the capacity to hear why it doesn't work. So it's never good to, if you broke a story about, a dentist who gives people laughing gas and then takes advantage of them, it's not really good to go and make it at a zoo and make it a zookeeper. Like, you don't want to do that kind of change, but you want to bring it up. You want to make it better. You want to add to it. So in comes the Prince Charming mask. This girl's lying, nobody believes her. And so when in the outline, when the detective says, well, what did he look like? I just laughed kind of and said Prince Charming to myself. And that's probably where like my humor, my dark sense of humor kind of comes in. And I thought, well, that's actually interesting. If he wore like a Prince Charming mask, because if you look at this mask and it was on somebody at a party, you wouldn't think it was creepy. But if it's on a man who broke into your home and is going to attack you, like, it's really, really scary. And the episode really became the Prince Charming episode. Like, everybody referred to it as the Prince Charming episode. And then the other part of it was, I knew if I wanted this mask to stay, I had to bring in examples of exactly what I had in my head so that the prop guy would deliver on it. And then everybody would be like, it's great, we're using it. And through the process of this mask getting made, he was showing us like the beginning stages of it, and it didn't look like this at all. And the director was like, well, what's scary is that he's wearing a mask and he's calling him Prince Charming. And the prop guy said, no, it's gonna look like Allison's photo. This is just the beginning stages. And I'll never forget the director, when the mask finally was revealed, then he was like, I want to add a scene. That scene that you just watched was not in the script. He's like, I want to add a scene where we catch him in the act. We have to see him with this mask on. This mask is so great. So it was very validating, but it's also like an example of when you get an outline, you really have to go through it beat by beat and say to yourself, like, SVU is notorious for doing interviews. Like, you walk into someone's kitchen, they're opening up their fridge and they're yelling at their kid while they're answering the cops' questions. And the reason why they do it like that, because honestly, if anyone ever came to me and was a police officer to ask me questions, I'd be sitting on my couch staring at them like, yes, sir, no, sir. Like, I wouldn't be moving around my kitchen. Like, they're there every day, but they have to keep the scenes moving and the energy moving, and they don't want it to be stagnant. So that's why they do things like that. But you have to, like, also as the writer, it's your responsibility to be like, look, we could go interview her boyfriend who we think may have raped her at a bar, but is that really interesting? We've probably seen that scene a million times. So I think in the same episode, I did some research and I found that there was a place where a company where guys taught each other how to sleep with as many women as possible. And then they put the number of women they slept with on their shirt. So when we went to interview this guy, he's working at this place with this number on his shirt, and everybody's got this number on their shirt. So you're already like, oh, he's the guy. And then he ends up not being the guy. So that's the kind of like work you have to do on your own to really elevate your script. And you have to not be afraid, because they're always going to, as long as you don't change the story, like I said, to, now he's, a zookeeper when he was supposed to be a dentist, you bringing it up and adding stuff to it. They're so far into whatever they're doing at the moment. They're into like what the actress is asking for. They're into what the production team is asking for. They're into what the network and the studio are asking for. They forget what the episode is even about. They forget what the beat to beat is. So you really like have an opportunity to really like show your craft and like elevate it. So that's like a big piece of advice, because I have handed in outlines early in my career where I just did what was on the page and I got rewritten. And it sucks to get rewritten. It really does. It happens all the time. Sometimes it happens when you hand in gold just because the person that's running the show wants to do something different or put their own voice on it or spin or, whatever the reason is. But, and it's part of the job, but I learned that I would get my stuff on screen more if I tried to use my voice, but do it in the voice of the showrunner in the style that he or she liked. And really worked hard just to like make it a scene that you didn't want to throw out.
Let's take a look at this page. What do you say?
So this is the script and of the episode you just saw and a clip of. And this is just to show you kind of, and I know all of you probably know what a TV script looks like at this point and a title page and all of that, but Mark and I were talking about like what kind of visuals I could bring. So I figured in a screenwriting class to bring a little visual of, and then I think the next one is just an actual scene in that same
Yeah,
episode.
let's try that one.
So this is another example. My boss, my showrunner, loved the opera. And so I again I wanted a scene that he wasn't going to throw out. So I asked him like who one of his favorite people were, and I put that song in the episode and had it play over the scene. And I think we hired, I think we have our music people do a version of it so we can use it and not have to get charged for it. Someone put in the chat, they've never seen a title page like that. So that's Wolf Films. They put everybody's name on the script that's a producer and above. So I don't think you get co-producer. No, maybe you get, do you get producer? I think you get producer and above, which I loved because I couldn't wait to get my name on a title page with all the other producers. But then I went to my next show and I was like supervising and co-EP and they don't put anybody on except the executives. So, but yeah, they have a lot of people involved in their shows. And then this was just the like like a shot of the opening of the episode. Do you have any questions you want to ask me? Anything I can?
Talk a little bit more about how the variations on the different writers' rooms, what you might, because you were doing this pre-Zoom and now it's changed a little bit.
Yeah.
Uh, Talk a
It's
little bit about.
yeah. So I was on Power Force for 2 days. We opened the writers' room for 2 days and then the country shut down. It was March 2020. It was March 9th that we started the room, and by I think it was the 11th, they told us all to go home. And that was such a, it's funny. I was so happy to be on Zoom because I had such a, I was so freaked out by COVID that I did not want to be in, like everyone was talking like, oh, we'll be in 2 weeks, we'll be back to a regular room. And I knew we weren't going to be back to a regular room. I mean, they closed down the NBA and Major League Baseball, which hadn't even started, which is like millions and billions of dollars. Like we were not gonna, they knew what we didn't. So that was my first Zoom room. I didn't have a problem with it at all. Some people really did. I mean, people fell asleep. Um, some people just felt, it just wasn't what the energy of a writer's room is. And it's interesting because it didn't affect my performance at all. And I have been in LA for very long, and the traffic here is very bad. And you lose a lot of your life when you are working on a show because a lot of times the showrunner isn't meeting with the room or things are going on and you don't really, and you're just in the room kind of like doing, I don't want to say busy work, but until you get direction, you're not able to go forward. And there's a feeling of it's 7 p.m., but I can't leave until the boss leaves kind of a thing. And the great thing about Zoom is we would close our computer and it's 4:30 and you're at your house. I had work to do sometimes, like either in the morning or like late at night, but I didn't I got a lot of my life back, which is something that I loved about it. And my performance wasn't affected. I love being in a room. I love pitching. Um, I'm probably somebody who, I don't want to say I talk too much, but I'm not afraid to like talk and get in there. So, but for other people, they hated it. And when I was on Bull, we were still I was on a room on East New York as well. But when I was on Bull, we, um, we uh we had one writer's room in my backyard. I invited everybody over. It was like a Christmas party, and we had I put my fire up, and like I had heated blankets, and we broke the room in my backyard. And I remember there was a guy on the show who was sitting next to me, and as we were breaking, I was like, yeah, like a bit of an elbow, and I'm like, oh, this is so nice. Like I can like tap the person next to me in the middle of us having this conversation. But um so there's certain things that definitely, being like this all the time, it takes away from you as a human being. I don't know if it necessarily takes away from you as a writer. I used to love when I got sent to outline or script because I just would sit at home and just write for hours. Like I worked better away from people than with people, because not because I'm reclusive, the opposite. I would be talking too much and be like not writing. So um but in terms of the rooms, we figured out a way to do the board. Like we had a thing called Writer's Room Pro in one room, Miro, I think, in the other, which I hate because you just can't see it very well. And then we did Google Slides in a room. That was great too. I don't think that it changed anything really. But in terms of just the rooms in general, the dynamic, like I think like the bigger thing is just the different dynamics of the room. Like one room, a showrunner will come in and be there with you the whole time. And then another room, they're like writing and they have a number two and they kind of go back and forth with the number two, and they come in like at like a certain time in a certain process, and they say, I like this or I don't like this or change that or throw the whole thing out. So, um, but yeah, if there's anything more specific in terms of it, I'm not really, I feel like I'm answering it, but I don't know if I'm answering the specific question.
On a related topic, let me ask you this. Uh, we have coming up here at the Nashville Film Festival in a couple months. One of the things they do is a pitch competition. So I think that pitching gets often overlooked by beginning writers.
Yeah.
Talk to us about how important pitching is and some techniques that are going to help folks, especially if they're starting out.
Um, so pitching, I mean, every writer will tell you they hate pitching, like, or most writers. Some will say they like it, like um, I th- I have a um I have a friend who loves to pitch. I mean, he's just like a idea machine. He's got a ton of confidence, He's great in a room. And you'll hear that all the time too. I'm great in a room, And I remember thinking, what does that mean? Like, there's a lot of things that are said a lot of times when you're a writer to you, like it's a safe room or I'm great in a room, and they're just sort of buzzwords because it's that to me, I think makes it more scary when you're pitching. Um, there's a difference. You're pitching ideas and then you're pitching episodes. So sometimes when you come into a writer's room, you are it all depends how the showrunner wants to organize it. It's a good idea to come in with a couple episodes if they decide to go around the room and everyone has to pitch what a story they're thinking of. But a lot of times what ends up happening is somebody goes with the story that they're thinking of, and then you start talking through that story. And that sort of will take up a lot of time before you move on to somebody else. So, but you should just come in, whether it's a meeting on a show um or you're working on the show already. You should come in with a couple of ideas. And then when you're actually working on an episode together and pitching, two things are important. One is listening. Because if you listen, people who like to talk or who have a lot of ideas or whatever, they'll kind of say this, that, and the other. And how the showrunner responds to what they say tells you what they're looking for. And that helps you go, okay, this is something that he's looking for. I'm going to throw this out. Research is like huge. I can't tell you how much research I've done in this job. I mean, we would be talking for, an entire day about whatever that's happening in the episode. And I would go home and I would either that night or the next morning get up very early and start looking for things off of what we were talking about in my brain that I thought might be great to bring in to say, what if we did this or what if we did that? Like, so your job is a lot of thinking, a lot of thinking. Not just when you're in the room. And the other thing is people people will, especially the first 2 weeks of a job, you'll notice that people will talk a lot and then they won't talk anymore because they've run out of stuff. They have nothing else. Seriously.
I
And
believe it.
you and I don't want to say everybody because like I love my fellow writers, but I've been on shows where someone just was very knowledgeable about one specific subject and they talked about it to death. And I thought, oh my God, like I have to go home and read all this stuff about what they're talking about because I know nothing about what they're talking about. And then I did it and we didn't use any of it, like none of it. I mean, I think I checked out, this is back when you checked out library books. I think I checked out library books on my friend's library card and then owed her like $200 because I forgot to return this stuff and we didn't even end up using it. But in that time, you recognize like, oh, this person's pitching this idea. I was thinking it, but I didn't say it. So the way to kind of sometimes protect yourself if you're afraid to say your ideas, this might be crazy or this might be a bad idea, and then you blow them away with your idea that's amazing, and they're like, whoa, that's so good. You don't want to do it all the time because then you don't seem like you have confidence in what you're saying. But if you are a little nervous about being laughed at or whatever it is, no one's going to laugh at you. I mean, maybe comedy rooms, they do that kind of stuff because they're just like um comedy writers. But other than that, like half the time you're thinking it, and that's the thing that's so mind like numbing because you're sitting there going, oh, should I say it? Should I say I have this idea? And then somebody else gets to it first and you're like, damn, I had that idea. So that's a big part of it, but you don't need to be like a pitch salesman. Like you don't need to come and say things in a certain way. I've seen people talk very quietly and deliver an amazing idea all the time. So it's not your tone. I mean, yes, like, who doesn't like an energetic person, but it's not it's not your tone. Writers by nature aren't that energetic. I guarantee you there's worse pitchers out there than you. If you think you're a bad pitcher. And so it's just really kind of being like rolling the dice and just sort of saying, look, I have this idea. What do you think? And a lot of times, like something in your idea is great. And then the showrunner or the executive or whoever it is, like kind of grabs it and says, okay, it would be great, but if we did this or that. Um, and so I think like, and don't always listen to other people too, because sometimes people will just poo-poo your idea just to like poo-poo your idea, Like if you believe your idea is good, you do it. Like who's to say it's not? Who's to say that you can't be the next, JJ Abrams or the guy that does White Lotus, but hopefully you'll hire.
Right.
But but no, I think I was not somebody that had like a ton of confidence when I came out here. I was very shy. I was very nervous. People were in writers' rooms, the first writers' rooms I was in, like everybody's talking about, oh, it's this movie and it's that movie. And I would leave thinking, okay, I gotta watch this movie tonight. I gotta watch that movie. And a friend said to me without me even saying it, there people will bring up so many movies and so many TV shows, and you will feel like you have to watch all of them, and you'll never be able to. So don't even try. Talk about the movie that you like. Talk about the TV show that you like. Like, bring what's interesting about you and your life and your background to whatever you do. So that's how I would go about pitching.
The one thing I had a question about
Sure.
is you kind of have two types of series now. You've got the episodic slash procedural where it's, an episode, and then you have the serialized that are sort of the ongoing plot arcs. And so my question is how does that change how the show is organized? It feels like it seems like the showrunner's coming into the season start when the room gets together with some basic ideas. And is there a different approach? Like it feels like in an episodic or a procedural, y'all can just riff on ideas for show pitches, but on a serialized drama, maybe not so much because it kind of has to conform to overall plot arcs and character arcs. Are they different, or what are the differences in how the work is done in the
Yeah.
room from a serialized and an episodic?
The only thing, one of the biggest things that's different with a serialized and an episodic is an episodic is a moving train. That you have the writers' room, like a lot of times, will start in the first week of June, let's say, and the pre-production will be like right around July 4th. Like I know it's a holiday, but like around that time that you're handing in your first draft of the first script. And then, you have like I don't know how exactly. I think it's like 8 days of prep, 7 days of shooting, or 7 days of prep, 8 days of shooting, but you have to have the next script going into prep when the first script is shooting, and then you've got that one goes into shooting and the next one goes into prep, and then you get into the editing cycle. And writers are involved in editing as well, not always, but a lot of times you're very, very involved in editing, and the showrunner's involved in editing and all of that. So it's a moving train. But and once it starts moving, that's it. Like suddenly there's not as much criticism and time to really like give to a script. It has to shoot. So you don't when you start in June on an episodic show, you may get noted to death until the train starts. The minute the train starts, you're just not getting as much notes, because there's just not time. And also the showrunner a lot of times will then be like, I have to take it at this point because I got to do my thing for it and all of that. But I say every show has a procedural element to it, even the serialized ones, because you have a blueprint. This is what people are expecting when they watch your show. Like John Hamm's new show, Friends and Neighbors. People are expecting that he's robbing people. So we've got to see him robbing someone every episode. We got to see him fall into some sort of trap or whatever it is. And then we got to see something with his kids and romance. That is a structure. That is, it's just not open and closed the way a procedural is. So when you're doing a serialized show, sometimes the difference is you have 10 episodes to write and execute before production even starts. So if things aren't working, you can make changes. I remember on Rogue, we broke the season, like, okay, this is what we're gonna say the season's about. This is who the bad guy is. This is what they're doing. This is what we're trying to uncover, yada yada yada. We got to like episode 5 and we really started to get to know the characters and get to know the world and get to know all of it, and scripts were coming in. And then suddenly once we got to 5, we realized we had to lay stuff in to 1, 2, 3, and 4 to reflect where we were going to go in 5 and beyond. So you change your mind a lot in serialized shows, because as you get going, you're like, it's much more interesting if this person dies versus this person. Well, now we got to, do this, that, and the other. So on Rogue, I remember one of the writers, they had episode 2, and we kept saying, after he wrote episode 2, can you go in and put that Ethan's dad smokes? Can you go in and put this? Can you go in and put that? And he was like guys, like I'm done with this script. And we had to have him keep going back in and like fixing things. Another thing that happened, and this is not fun. This is like why like pilots sometimes aren't the funnest shows to work on, because you got so many eyeballs on it and so many people who like feel like they got to earn their paychecks as well, and they have to like, they have to have a successful show, otherwise like they can get fired. There's turnover all the time on the development side of things and the current side of things. And so they need to at least feel that they did everything they could before the show aired to make sure that it was a success. And so that makes everybody kind of act, like, "Ah." But it was on Power, and COVID happened, so our production date got completely moved, and I worked on that show from March until August, like July 29th or something, and it was supposed to be a 20-week room.
Oh,
And
wow.
by the time the 20 weeks ended, everyone had written an outline, and that was it. And then no scripts, no approval, nothing got read, nothing went to um, anywhere. And then they said the room's done. We may bring you back in September, but we don't have anything right now. So we're like, okay. And then September 5th rolled around and we all got an email saying, see you tomorrow. And this is just television, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's just like there's lots of things that they have to get greenlit and passed and money and everything like that. But you're in the dark a lot, and your showrunner will try to like help talking to you and everything, but they're also trying to figure out what's going on and getting answers and all of that. So I was like, okay. So we came back, and I remember the showrunner kind of said, so we may be back for like 3 weeks so everybody can write their scripts. And then he got a phone call and he said, so everybody's employed till the end of the year. So we ended up staying until the end of December, and which was great. I mean, it was COVID. I was like thinking, oh, we may never work again, we're all gonna die. But on that show, then they were really on it. Then they were like now focused on it. So every script, every outline, we would have like somebody that was in the show for all 10 episodes, and they'd be like, "We don't like this character. We want you to kill them in episode 5." So then we'd go back and change it all, and then we'd show them the change, and then they'd be like, "It was better the way you had it. So this person's alive again." And it just, it was like a moving target, and you never knew where the goalposts were. And the lesson I think from that show is a lot of people got kind of frustrated, as you will get, and kind of lost. Like, I don't even know where we are now. Like, is this person alive? Are they dead? Where did we land? So the person who has the hardest job in the room is the showrunner. And that can bring out, all kinds of things in a person. And obviously, in a workplace environment, we all want to make sure that we're treated with respect. But at the same time, you getting frustrated with them changing things, they're over here having conversations that you know nothing about. That is the reason why they're making these changes, while also making sure that they put on a brave face for you, that they've got it under control. And, so that's the kind of stuff to keep in mind. And never treat anybody like their ideas are dumb. Not that you will, but there's people. I've been in rooms with people that I didn't think were that great. I didn't think that they had a great work ethic. And they're like creators now. And so people get jobs all the time. Some people have the right agents and the right managers who put them in the right places, and they pitch an idea and they have a good story, whatever it is. Like, they have one really good story and they sell a script. And so you just always have to, I think relationships with the people that you're working with are so important, and trying always to just not get sucked into whatever drama there is, because it's easy to do it. It's just, it's easy to get sucked in, and oh, I heard so and so is gonna get let go and blah 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 blah. And you really just have to like, okay, that's interesting. You don't want to be like a wall to that person either, but be as diplomatic as you can. One of the best things that a writer showrunner said to me was especially when a show is kind of just off the rails, um, you feel like your voice is getting completely wiped out, whatever it is, everyone's unhappy, yada, yada, yada. He said, don't be careless, just care less. So that's sort of the thing. Sometimes you care too much and you can get in the way of things too. You can get in the way of yourself as well. You can be annoying. So it's not, be helpful. Be helpful. When I was on Rogue, the first season, because I hadn't worked in a while and I was just very green in a writer's room and all of these things, the showrunner kind of didn't he liked me. I think he thought I was good at pitching, but I don't know that he took to my writing right away because I hadn't I needed a little bit more experience maybe or something. And everybody was so fed up with the show and he was having a lot of problems with the network and the studio. They were very unhappy with things. And he needed to come up with new scenes to make the show make sense because it wasn't making sense. And nobody did anything. But I went home and I watched all the dailies. I was the only person that watched the dailies in the room. I watched all the dailies and I went through and I was like, these are two people that we have not seen on screen. And I think it would be great if we did a scene with the two of them. And let's set it in this restaurant and they can do it before it opens and they can have this private like falling out. And every scene I pitched him, he didn't have me write it, but he had his guy write it. And it went into the episode and he thanked me. And that's what got me another season on the show. And then when I was on the show the next season, then I shoved my work in his face and was like, you should be using me more as a writer. And he really said, I I think I didn't give you enough time. I think I should have given you more time. This is great. So and that led to me getting hired by another writer that was on the show that went on to do Chicago Justice and Bull and not Bull, SVU. And so I got 3 years of work out of it. So um, it can be a very frustrating business and as Josh Holloway from Lost said, Hollywood can break your heart. It can totally break your heart. But if you really want to be in this business, you really want to be in it. And I don't say that like you don't want to be in it if, you don't do this and that. I just mean it takes more than it gives a lot of times because of the fact that there's like people are there's so much competition and they're changing things so much with after the writer's strike and everything that and I don't even say that to like discourage any of you. I've had people try to discourage me, and I was like, I'm going to be the exception. And even with getting like the career that I have, like I still, I'm developing right now, but I'm still worried what's my next job going to be and is there going to be another job? Um and that has to be something that you really want to sign up for. Like not working and chasing work and trying to get work because it's not just working. When you're working, like it's great. But in a different way it has its hiccups, but that's just you have to chase it, and it's a lot of unknown even when you get older and you have a resume. It's still a lot of unknown. You don't hear people talk about it enough, even actors. You don't see them for a while. Well, they've auditioned for a bunch of stuff. Nobody wanted them. They weren't right for the role. And it's kind of shocking because you're like, wow, who would think, this person after they just were in this Academy Award winning film would be out of work, but they are. Development is like kind of the thing that everybody says when they're not working. It's not, and some people really are like really developing like that, like I said, like the J.J. Abrams of the world, but that is that is not like the reality, I think. Most people are working writers, not the working man's writer, so to speak.
So I saw a couple questions in the chat. I'll come back to those in a second, and I appreciate you still sticking with us. I would be remiss if I didn't ask this question. Um,
Yes.
okay, so you are in Los Angeles, and pretty much all of us are in the great state of Tennessee. So let's say what does that look like if I've got a pilot, a pitch deck? How does somebody from not in Los Angeles
Yeah.
get in front of people to get their idea out? I would think
Yeah. I mean,
even people in the
that's
business are already struggling with that. So
yeah. And I mean, the thing is like your agents and your reps will always tell you the business is tough until they get you a job, because they just are worried that they're not going to get you a job and you're going to be angry at them. I mean, my agent, I love her, but she's definitely said that kind of to me before. Like, oh, it'd be so great if like that friend of yours who, gets shows, got a show and hired you. And I'm like, oh my God, are you saying I'm not going to get staffed? And then I get staffed. But, that kind of stuff happens. But really, like getting in front of like a studio exec or a production company or anything like that is not going to happen without a manager and agent. It's very rare unless you are really good friends with somebody that is willing to read your thing and then put you up for it. Just an example, my friend went to high school with Aaron Sorkin. She sent him a screenplay that she wrote, and he read it and he got back to her in like 6 days and had all these amazing things to say about it to her. But he's like, I'm too busy and I can't help. But he wasn't like calling anybody else and kind of saying like, can you help? Can you help? And not because he's not like a guy that might help somebody out. I don't know him at all. He's incredibly talented, but everybody gets asked to read your your script. Everybody gets asked if you'll put their daughter up, their friend up, you up, whatever. So people in this business are constantly being asked for stuff. And you can't, I mean, I'm even at a place now where when people ask me, like if I'll mention them to my agent, I used to be more open to doing it, but I just know that my agent's going to be like, no, I mean, they have no credits and they're developmental and like all of these things. So how do you get an agent in that situation? And I think there's a bunch of ways to break into this business that you have to kind of do all of them, and one of them hopefully clicks. So look for managers. Managers usually are more inclined to read you and rep you. And then they kind of do the work that the agent doesn't want to do until you get a job. So they really get you into rooms and meetings and all of these things. I mean, I was represented by like one of the big five agencies my first job because I got staffed on SVU and they were like, they didn't really have to do anything. I mean, they just signed me. I had already gotten staffed on my own. And they put me out for like one meeting at staffing season when I left SVU. And that was it. And they just were like, we can't do anything for you. You're developmental, you're too young, blah, 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 whatever the reasons were. Then I got an agent and I was like in the room at AMC and they wanted to hear about my pilot and where I saw it going and like they were interested in developing it. So, it's like when people tell you like, oh, I can't do anything for you, find somebody else that can. Doesn't mean you ditch your agent, but go find a manager. I had two managers and an agent for a while, and people were like, why do you have two managers? And I was like, because I had two managers when I wasn't working, and they got me into more rooms and more meetings. And if I get a job, then I'm happy to pay them both 7% because I'm making money. And like when you're working, you make good money. Um, Eventually I let both my managers go, but this was, years later. I hung on to them for like 6 years of like consistent work that I was doing. But yeah, you have to like find find managers like names and send them an email. And one of the greatest tools is social media, because if you look on social media, maybe you can find something out about them on their Facebook page, like where they went to school, who their friends are. You might find somebody that's a common friend, and then you can ask that friend, hey, how well do you know so and so? Would you mind if I used your name when I email them as like a reference? And like really go for it. I mean, even now, as I'm trying to sell this, get this children's book published, every subject line says Law and Order SVU producer and writer, because I know it's going to get the email opened. Now, you guys might not have that, but if you have a reference, somebody like use it, and then getting into writers' rooms, being a writer's assistant, being a researcher for the writers, whatever it is that gets you in there so that you're with the people that are making those decisions. I mean, they're always more inclined to give a job to an assistant over like someone they don't know. I mean, when I left SVU the first time, I was told constantly by my agents they're giving their freelance script to the staff, to their assistant. They're giving the staff job to their assistant, and I was like, I can't believe this. I was an assistant and a researcher, and then it became staff. Now I'm fighting with the people that had my job, so you know talking about it, talking about your script to people, you'd be surprised who somebody knows. My in at SVU was through my mother, believe it or not. She was a teach. She was no, she was my mom was a school psychologist at a school district with a substitute teacher who sister worked in production. She was the location manager at Law and Order SVU. And she asked her sister to talk to me. And she talked to me, and we kind of just had like and I sent her my cover letter and my resume. And I don't know that anything happened. She just kind of talked to me and then it went away. And so I went and got her a Nordstrom's gift card and I sent it to her, and it was like $25, which you can't get anything at Nordstrom's for $25. But I had no money and I didn't really know that because I didn't shop at Nordstrom's. And I sent it to her with a card thanking her for talking to me. This was the thing that like got her to be like, oh my God, no one's ever bought me a gift. I'm a locations manager. No one, no one thanks me for, what I do. So she sent my resume to one of the writers, and then that writer put me in for a PA job and I didn't get it. And then I went to Cabo to work on a reality movie, and I got her salt and pepper shakers from Cabo and I sent them to her as a thank you. And then she took me to lunch, and another writer heard about the salt and pepper shakers and put me up for a research job because she thought it was such a classy thing to do for somebody like, at my level. And that's how I got into SVU. And I'm not saying you need to start emptying your bank account for people, but writers are probably more inclined to talk to you than anybody else, because no one really cares about us as much as they care about the celebrities, especially if you're just a writer on staff versus like, the showrunner. I mean, you can find an email easily or their Facebook page and write them something nice about an episode they wrote, and establish a rapport, and then, ask them like they have any pointers and whatever, and go from there, so that's kind of I would look for a manager. I'd find as many emails as you can, and write a nice, get Chat GPT or whatever it is. I'm not promoting AI, but they write a good bio and a good cover letter. But write a nice polished letter and say something nice about the person, specific about what you like or about them or their client list or their episodes of shows or whatever. And just, that's what you got to do. You got to like kind of hit it from all sides. I see writers sometimes, aspiring writers sometimes, be on staff as um, the script coordinator or the writer's assistant, and they get a freelance script from the showrunner, and then they don't go and get themselves an agent. And I'm like, why aren't you getting yourself an agent? Like, you need to have the agent now start bugging the showrunner about hiring you. Um, they're much more inclined to take you on, a manager or an agent, if you have, a bird in the hand. And so then they didn't do it, and then they didn't get staffed. And I've seen that happen. I saw that happen to a friend like over and over again, where he would get scripts, but he wouldn't get himself representation. It's everything. It's the entire plane, all of it. You think, the condiments don't matter, the peanuts, you need it all, like all of
Yeah.
it. So that's how I would attack it.
You said something earlier about how I mean you basically you got the gig and got the agent after the fact. And I've heard that a lot. And I think sometimes what I hear from a lot of beginning writers is there's sort of this belief that all my problems will be solved if I simply have representation. And I keep hearing over and over again that, you know, I want to say it wasn't Alvaro. Somebody had said how my agent actually hasn't gotten me any jobs. I get the jobs and they advise me and put the paperwork together. And I think that um I mean, is that something that you see happen a lot where you have to be your
Combination.
own agent? You have to be your own agent to a certain extent.
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination. Like if you
Mhm.
have if you have an agent that's good, they don't not do anything, I mean, certainly some agents cool on you, like for whatever reason. It happens with actors too. Um, but I think like the assumption that it's just your agent is not a good assumption. You need to be, if you see that someone's got a show and you know them, you need to write them an email and say, I'm available and I'd love to work for you and, whatever. And then you need to tell your agent, hey, I know this writer and worked with them on this. Can you email them and see if they'll read my script? That kind of a thing. Um, but it's hard because sometimes like no one has a show, and you're not, your script isn't rising above the pile, not because it's not good. It hasn't gotten read probably. And it's hard to get past that because that's just like the nature of the business. I mean, just to put it in acting terms, when we do casting, they put a bunch of self tapes up, but they put their best three. If you see it in the best three, you're not watching the other 10. You're just not. And it's a time thing. You found the person you like and you're going to go with that person. So if I wrote a showrunner and said, Mark is great. I've worked with him before. You can hire him. Your script's going to probably get pulled from the pile. He's going to read it. If he likes it, he's going to, give you an interview, or he's going to call somebody and say, hey, I've been told this guy Mark is good. Like, you worked with him. What do you think? So, uh, so I think that you have to do it all.
Mm.
You have to be looking at the trades. You have to be, you know, looking for connections that you had the people that are getting a show. You have to be looking at what you bring to the show that like maybe somebody else doesn't. Like maybe you were a nurse and you stopped being a nurse, or your mom was a nurse, or your aunt was a nurse, and it's a show about nursing. Um, that sort of stuff. But your agents don't not do anything. I think that they just only can get so far. Everybody can only get so far. And my last few jobs, I didn't know anybody. My agent got me both of those. But the ones before that, I knew somebody and somebody wanted me, and so I just got hired. So it's a mix. But the other thing you have to do is keep writing. Like I wrote a memoir when the strike started. I wrote a screenplay, and I wrote two. I wrote no. Yeah, I wrote. I mean, I think I wrote two pilots. And I was sort of like, I'm done. My agent has a ton of new material for me. Now it's your job. And then, nothing like, I mean, I got some meetings and stuff like that, but nothing was really happening. And so I wrote a pilot. And then I wrote another pilot. After I went back to Pittsburgh, I wrote another pilot. And, you know, I, you gotta like, in one of my pilots, there is a company that has shown interest in it, but we're in a holding pattern to see if something's going to happen. But I mean, I didn't really plan on writing that pilot. I just kept sitting around. So I was like, oh, well, I had this in my head. Why not just put it down on paper? But yeah, so you just have to keep writing and hope that at some point, whatever material you have will be something that somebody wants. But getting inside is kind of the key. So you got to get it through all different sides. Do you want to jump for questions? Just because I gotta jump
Do
soon
that.
because of
Let's
my
do that.
time.
Do you want to open the mics or just look through the go through the chat?
Yeah, okay. I can look at let me skim the chat. I didn't mention I can't read. I'm kidding.
Get
Okay.
paid extra for that.
Um, oh, you have family in Little Washington, PA? That's so great. Sal, Mark and I, we know each other through our dads who were both good friends and grew up in did your dad grow up in Sharpsburg as well?
Hmm. Yep, they
Um,
were besties.
you're long. I just finished season 19, I think. Uh, let me see here. Okay, I got that one. Um, got that one. Uh, who's my favorite character on Law and Order and SVU and why? I like all of them. They were all very, very nice. Mariska used to invite us over to her house to watch the episode every week. I mean, it was kind of shocking because the show was in season 19 and you're like, wow, you're still watching it. But like, yeah, she invited us over every week. So she's great and she'll sit with you at Video Village and you'll tell stories and she's just got a big personality, and she's a good number one. Um, and then I would say, Ice is really cool. Like he'll sit with you, and if you just ask him a question, he'll just get talking. And with Snoop Dogg, with that episode was an Ice-T episode, and he called up Snoop in his trailer with the showrunner and the producing director and was like, just say yes. We don't, this is TV. We don't pay a lot. Just say yes. And then, and then he hung up the phone and Snoop was probably one of the coolest people I've ever met. I mean, I like Snoop Dogg, but I wasn't like, oh, Snoop Dogg. And then when he showed up for the day of filming his first scene, he was like, well, what does Allison have to say? And I remember I was like, oh my God, I'm acting like so starstruck right now. But everybody, nobody cared. Everybody asked him for a photo. Nobody had any kind of like, I mean, the actors were acting differently. Like everybody was massively starstruck, and everyone took a ton of photos. Yep, and that I show you that photo because I know that you guys would like it. But oh, I hate myself in that photo. I look terrible. But that was the day of the big rapper rivalries. And he was just the coolest guy ever. He took a photo with everybody. Kelly was very nice to my mom. So she's a really good egg. But they're all amazing in their own way. But like it was one of the experiences where everybody just acted like a professional. Um, so yeah, okay, let me see here. I don't know a lot about getting music on TV, so sadly. It's not really like something that I deal like a lot with. It's more just like if you want like a Bob Dylan song, you have to pay through the roof. So they'll have like somebody who sings a version of it. I mean, I remember in that rap episode, I wrote some like lyrics of like what the rapper could be saying when he was singing, and they hired somebody literally to write a rap song so that he could sing it um on stage. So I mean maybe the essence of what I wrote was there, but it was completely like they hired somebody to do it. That's yeah, I'm sorry, I just don't know. I don't know a lot about music. Uh
Topic around here. It comes up a lot.
yeah. I mean, it's always good to put like a song in in a pilot, especially because you're really setting the tone for the show and the characters and the feeling and the emotion. So, I don't put songs much in episodes, more in pilots. I'll put like a song, like somebody's running, and then I think I put an Imagine Dragons song just to kind of sell the energy of the attitude. Deadlines. Yeah, I mean, that's good a question. Sometimes your deadline is 2 weeks, sometimes your deadline's a week, sometimes your deadline is 2 days. I've written a script in 2 days. And one time I think that I remember the showrunner just didn't like the direction that me and another writer went. So we rebroke it in an afternoon and then he liked it. And then we went off and wrote it and we wrote it in 2 days. It's the fastest I've ever written, um, except East New York. That was also really fast. But I was the fastest I've ever written. And it was kind of liberating because you didn't have time to think about it. So you didn't like sit there and think about a clue. Like you clues just came and you're like, this is gonna be what it is, you know? So and it turned out to be a great episode. So Lucy Liu directed it. It was a stalker episode. And then another episode I wrote an outline with no beat sheet, nothing. It wasn't broken in the room. It was like one of these situations where things started coming in late and there were a lot. It was a new show and it was like things were getting noted to death because it was a new show. And it was like, when can you have your outline? And I said, well, I don't know, like Friday. And they're like, well, what about tomorrow? And I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing it tomorrow. Um, and that's the other thing. You have to do it. So yeah, so that's Lucy Liu next to Mariska, Sherry Appleby, who was um the guest actor for the week. She played the stalker, and then me and one of the executive producers, another writer on the show. Um, that's the kind of stuff that Mariska likes to do, you know, like put out a girl power episode. I mean, photo. Um, so yeah, it just all depends. And you know, you sometimes you have to cancel, you know, your trip and all these other things or whatever you're doing. But you know, you also it's like you can't make more work for the showrunner. He's having to give up his entire life all the time. So if you have to cancel your birthday party because they need you to like rewrite something, I mean, if you can find a way to do both, like try to do both, but sometimes that's just the way it goes. Some as you get older and you're in this business longer, you know, sometimes you say like, "Hey, this is important. It's my kids, whatever, and I got to do it, and I'll get it done, but I gotta do it, you know." And they'll you know, sometimes I understand if my son, I adopted my son, and I was didn't tell anybody, and I was in the middle of writing a script, and he came like a month early. And I was like, okay, I guess I have to tell them that I'm at the hospital with my child and I'm supposed to hand the script in. And I called them and I mean, I was freaking out about it. I was like, oh no, I'm gonna get fired. But then I kind of just told myself, well, okay, if I get fired, I get fired. I mean, you have to find your mental health comfort zone. You can't give everything. So I told them they were very cool about it. And I got the script to them like a couple days later. So, but you gotta roll with it. Not everything you do they're gonna like. They're gonna throw stuff out. And it's just what happens. Try to be the fixer. Try to figure out how to
Mhm.
preserve what you have without, you know, coming up with a new thing, but still keep a lot of what you have because nobody wants to throw everything out. Um, Not even the showrunner. A pure adrenaline rush. Yeah, it can be at times, yeah. Um, oh, ChatGPT. Here's the thing. It's like I'm not for telling ChatGPT to write you a script about, a blonde woman coming and talking to your class. I think it's a great tool for proofreading and for polishing like a letter or a bio or something. I think that even writers make a lot of typos and a lot of mistakes, and you really don't look professional when you spell someone's name wrong or you spell the company wrong or so, and we all make those mistakes even though we've looked at something 100 times. So it's a good device for that. So I think what I was kind of getting at is, you want to get something proofread and you by somebody and you want to make sure that there's no typos and you're going to have at least one or two typos, but try not to because people really just everybody's looking for a reason not to read you, not to hire you, not to do anything because they get asked all the time, and so they're trying to find something to quickly disperse of you so they can hire their friend or hire someone they've worked with before. So don't give them a reason. Um, the
I know
good,
we're running, I know we're running over, but let's try and see if can you tackle David Merrill's question
yeah, I was just
before
getting
we
to
go?
it. Right,
Yeah.
literally, that's the one I was going to do, and it's a great question.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I remember it applies for a pilot as much as it applied for when the person said it to me. I remember I took a class at UCLA with for advanced TV writing it was called. And he wrote up on the board in really big letters, this time it's personal. So your pilot cannot be episode 4 or episode 15. It has to be the first episode of the season or the finale. That's the kind of episode pilot that you need to write. It needs to have every bell and whistle there is. It needs to go there, go there, go there, go there, go there, stand out. So, this time it's personal comes from I think like Jaws or something. And the idea being it's personal to your main character because that's the person we're going to be following. That's the person we're going to care about. That's the person we're going to want to see every week. So you've got to give them like an amazing story, an amazing motivation, and just really like and something really unique and different, If you think about the Homeland pilot and Claire Danes and just like who she was and how out of the box she was and just, she was so interesting and you wanted to watch her. I mean, I don't know if it was the first episode or the second episode where she shows up at the if you guys remember the show, but she shows up at this AA meeting or something and she ends up having sex with the guy in the back of the car. I mean, that's something that you're going to be like, holy cow, like I'm in. Who's this character? Um, but justified, like don't go do something that's crazy and not have a reason for it because then that just kind of feels like a trick and kind of cheap. But you really just want to have your characters pop and have your dialogue pop. I have samples of pilots that I have that really aren't like you really don't know what the show is. I'm not saying that you aim for that, but it's such a fun read and the character is so interesting that people read the whole thing and they remember it and they love it and it's gotten me a lot of work. Like I have a pilot and the it's called Muffin and it's about an overweight guy who is like terrible, like hapless in love, and you really feel sorry for him. And then he goes into a 7-Eleven and accidentally shoots somebody, and he realizes like everyone thinks he's traumatized by it, but he actually really realized, oh, I like killing people makes me feel alive. And that's like sort of like what the pilot's about. And I don't know necessarily what the show is. I mean, I do in a way, but like it's more about um I mean, a writer called it like kind of a heavy set Dexter, you know. But I mean, it's really just about I just put as much like front loaded it with as much like funny dialogue and interesting characters so that it really sang, you know. I mean, you definitely need to have a structure in a beginning and middle and end, but think about the fact that people read scripts all day long and they're probably not going to get past like page 5 or page 10. It's just they're not. They don't have time or their assistant's going to read it, whatever it is. So you really want to like I don't want to say that you give up after page 10. No, but you really want to like keep your foot on the gas the entire time. Don't take it off the gas. Think this time it's personal. Um, can you get on the inside living in? Yeah, I mean everything is I haven't not had a meeting that hasn't been on Zoom since the strike. I mean, I had a meeting just the other day with Warner Brothers and it was on Zoom. It's always on Zoom now. But yeah, you can get emails, get, you know, whatever it is to get to write people and reach them. You can totally do it. And people hire people now from anywhere because a lot of times a lot of people like Zoom. But if you have to move to LA because you got a job, it's good. That's a good place to be.
Right.
So is that
That-
oh sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that should cover it. I feel guilty because I know you need to get back with your son, and we're about 15 minutes over. But I do want to. I do hope that um, that we can have you back sometime.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's way more of your brain to pick than we got at today.
Yeah.
Um, but thank you so much for joining us. And I know how busy you are, and keep us in the loop on what's happening out there. And we'd love to have you come back.
Sure, it was just a lot of fun. It's fun to talk and always give people any advice that I can. And Heidi, congratulations on your job because that's great.
Thank
So
you.
huge thing. All right. Well, thank you so much. Everybody have a great night. I'll talk to you later.
So much, Allison. Take care.
Sure.
Thank
Bye.
you.
And everybody else, you know where to be next week. Nashville Film Institute. And if you can't make it, we'll be on Zoom for summer school. I'd ask Bob to talk about summer school, but he does that plenty enough without my prompting him to do so. So we'll just tune in next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. And I hope you all enjoyed this. I'm going to try and get this edited at some point when I can take a breath. And if you missed any of it, if you came in late, maybe you can check what happened before. But thanks so much for tuning in. I want to do this again. I think I've got a line on a producer in the next couple months and somebody from a production company. So stay tuned for more news on future study halls. My name's Mark Nacareto. I'm president of the TSA. Thanks for everyone who came out tonight. And that was a good showing. We're looking at darn near 30 some people. That was fantastic. And don't forget the most important lesson of the evening is just keep writing. Thanks, guys. Take
Thanks
care
a
and have a
lot.
good night.